managing those meetings, he said, you have the first one that loses their temper loses. And so when you're in these conflict situations, brother so-and-so's getting a little heated, you keep calm. You keep more calm than you normally do. Now that may upset them because they are wanting, that's how they are used to conflict. But what you want to do is keep the focus on the thing that's under consideration, not being drawn into an emotional response. Maybe we're talking about 6 to 7 months, where there's obviously things taking place outside the pulpit to try to retrieve the person involved. And when that was to no avail, toward the end of that process, the last 3 or 4 weeks of that, and we can talk about how long do you take to practice church discipline. And for that family, they felt like everything was all church discipline all the time. You could understand it from their standpoint because it was very painful for them. But there was a lot of, and we were in a context where church discipline had not been practiced before. When I was in the Richmond, Virginia area, from the very beginning, it had been a regular part of congregational life all the way through, which makes it easier. And it also makes it easier on the pulpit, not to have to just run the risk of berating the brethren over a subject. To me, what you've got to ask is, you certainly want to be as loving and as delicate as you can be when you're dealing with that subject. It's one of the hardest things to deal with. You want to make sure that the compassion and the love that you feel for the souls that are in jeopardy is evident. And that should be modeled by the leadership that gets up before the congregation. Anybody who is dealing with that needs to be demonstrating how hard and difficult this is for the church. But depending on how much it's been practiced, there is a need to make sure that folks misunderstand. This is not excommunication. We're not, Catholics. But you can say that so many times, and you know what? There's going to be a portion of people who are just going to have it stuck in their head. That's what this is. But at some point, you can't just keep, preaching that, because the people who are going to get it are going to get it. Some people emotionally are never going to get it. And what you pray for is that when that person is restored, if they are, then there's going to be a change of heart in those people who think this is harsh on me. And it's amazing that even though you are preaching an expository sermon on 1 Corinthians chapter 5, that people, because they're so visceral, it's so emotional then, they are ready to shoot the messenger, even though it's eminently biblical. And even if it's textbook almost identical to 1 Corinthians 5, or it's one of the categories at the end of the chapter, or 1 Corinthians 6, or 2 Thessalonians 3, or Romans 16, 17, or Titus 3, 9 through 11, and it just fits it perfectly. But it's my son, it's my husband, it's my, whatever. And it's hard for folks to accept it, even though it's, you think about how we can appreciate how our friends in the Baptist church, because it doesn't meet with what they've done. You teach on baptism, and it doesn't matter that you can demonstrate from every kind of New Testament literature that baptism is essential to salvation. There's a wall up. Right. And I think that's what we encounter in that. So probably you need to preach about it more than the congregation may think, but there is a saturation point where you've just done what you can do on it. And you've got to be prayerful and wise. Don't know that much more than a month is going to be productive if you do your job in the lessons that you preach. But that's a judgment call. That's not Bible. That's subjective.
That subject that we're talking about right now is so difficult when you don't have an eldership.
Absolutely.
It's such a difficult conversation to have and to preach on when you don't have an eldership, because one of the things that I've always thought important when you have a congregation with an eldership, that is something that the preacher preaches on and the eldership teaches on. Mm-hmm. Because that's one of the reasons that they are to be apt to teach, is because that is a matter that they need to speak on as well.
That's right. And to demonstrate a unity between us. Now, I'll say my father-in-law was at Manchester, Georgia, in the late 80s. I mean, that's another generation. But they practice church discipline without an eldership. It can be done, but as you say, I grew up in church. I grew up in Georgia, and I can't remember a congregation where we had an eldership where I was old enough to remember it. And it does make it extremely hard to practice church discipline without an eldership. It can be done, but it's tough. All right. Yes, sir. Same.
If we do have
No, go ahead,
something
Sam.
longer, if we do have something longer, would it be good to kind of give the church a warning about that? Hey, for the next 4 Sundays, we're going to be discussing this, and kind of give them a expectation to be like, hey, here's the length of time, but also we're not going to run on and on and on.
I'm of two minds on that. Here's why I'm inclined to say no. I don't know if I want to telegraph it, because you'll get one in the can before they realize when you come back next week, so that they're, sometimes people are bracing like, oh man, we got a month of this, It's a difficult subject. But there could be wisdom. When I'm preaching a series, I'm not a big believer in long series, and it's kind of harder to do series in the situation that I'm in with Hiram. But you don't want to be, you don't have to be eternal to be immortal. So, I think there's a limit to some of that. So I don't know that I would, but I don't think it's wrong to. You have to know your folks. That goes back to one of our earlier points. Okay. Any other comments?
Isn't it also important that we combine the teaching and the pulpit together, because that's a subject that you just can't just come from the pulpit and just be authoritative and that's it. You got to be able to engage and make people open and respond, so you can get close to them so they can feel comfortable. The concept, if there is no love, then what's the sense of withdrawal? So if they don't know you love them and it's the purpose of why you're doing it, you're just beating a dead horse, and you're making your preaching hard. And then that's also a fail safe for brothers. Sometimes brothers will get you, if you don't have an eldership, to go speak on a subject that they already know there's going to be problems. And you need to be careful with that, because you need to be able to get the full scope of everything. Without an eldership, you don't know everything, because you're not with everybody in the flock. And so you got to be careful. You have to discern that.
Absolutely. And I do think that very specifically, Jeremiah, you bringing that up is probably one of the most important things of a difficult nature that we'll preach on. The Bible classroom provides, it'd be my least favorite part because of it, but the most important is you got to give a feedback loop. How are you going to know the misunderstandings that people have? And you mentioned one of them right up top. People say the accusations, the assessment is that's the most unloving thing that you can do. Whereas if we go to Hebrews 12, whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he chastens every son whom he receives. And so this is love. This is hard love, when you discipline your children because you love them. He that spares the rod hates his son. He who loves him disciplines him diligently, right? So in a Bible classroom setting, and what you've got to make sure you do there is keep temperature down. This is in conflict resolution. This is always an important principle. I had a CEO of a major company say he's in boardroom meetings with investors and with the hierarchy of his company. And he said, in managing those meetings, he said, you have the first one that loses their temper loses. And so when you're in these conflict situations, brother so-and-so's getting a little heated, you keep calm. You keep more calm than you normally do. Now that may upset them because they are wanting, that's how they are used to conflict. But what you want to do is keep the focus on the thing that's under consideration, not being drawn into an emotional response. And you can understand that they're probably coming from a position of hurt, a position of perhaps ignorance. There are a lot of different things to explain why they are losing their cool. They may have misunderstood what you said, but by keeping control, I mean, and that's hard to do when you know that there's controversy in certain subjects.
Right.
But to keep control of yourself and to try to keep the issue at the center is important. All right. Yeah, Bible class, extremely important.